All right, men of Reddit, let's hear it. We've all had those moments where we did something so stereotypically masculine that it felt like we unlocked a secret badge of manliness. Maybe you fixed a car engine with duct tape and a prayer, challenged your friend to a burrito eating contest and won, or spent 3 hours perfecting a backyard fire pit. Whatever it is, share it. What is that one thing you're quietly proud of but would never brag about in real life? No judgment here. Let's celebrate the ridiculousness. Story 1. I bought a laser level and perfectly adjusted various wall-mounted items. I checked it with an old-fashioned level, and it was perfect every single time. Story 2. I'm on holiday in Fiji at the moment. The air conditioner stopped working in our bure, so I went outside to inspect the unit like I have any idea what I'm doing. I plugged a pipe back in that looked like it had been knocked loose, and the air conditioner is working again. I am a manly man. Story 3. I remembered having tossed a small roll of duct tape behind a bookcase 4 to 5 years earlier while at my father's place. We needed duct tape, and instead of going out on a 5-minute trip to buy some, I spent 30 minutes moving the bookcase, retrieving the roll, using it, putting the bookcase back, and tossing the roll behind it again. My father was so proud he almost cried. Story 4. I bought a box fan marked down at Walmart. I opened it up and plugged it in. It was making a huge, annoying noise. I lived with it for a couple of days, then got fed up and took it apart to see what was going on. It turned out the plastic flashing on the blades wasn't cut off, and it was flapping on the grates. I sliced it off, and the fan became instantly quiet. It was the best feeling in the world knowing I had the knowledge to take something apart and diagnose its problem. Also, I was homeless from February 2023 to September 2024. While at the homeless shelter, I became known as the tech person. If anybody had an issue with their phone, laptop, or whatever, I was the one to fix it. I even helped troubleshoot a problem with the shelter's server system. Story 5. 2 women and 1 man were moving when I was heading to the gym and saw them struggling to pack all their belongings into the van they rented. They were almost done but couldn't fit a few remaining items. I put my bag down, offered to help, rearranged some larger items, and used my Tetris skills to pack everything perfectly and safely so they could transport all their things in one trip. It was a moment of kindness and teamwork. Story 6. The most recent repair was the tumble dryer. We have 2 children and live in the United Kingdom, where it rains frequently. The dryer gets used quite often. This happened in October last year. It was not working properly and made a horrible noise, but it still operated. It obviously bothered her, so I pulled it out, found the issue, the pump was wearing out, and managed to get a new unit for £13 from the parts store near us. Took me 30 minutes. She was very grateful. Story 7. Got lucky with my first car. It was old but never gave me trouble except for the positive crankcase ventilation valve. Up until that point, it was the only thing I knew about cars. My attractive older neighbor had car trouble. I went to take a look, just pretending to know what I was doing. I checked the valve. It was broken. I drove to the store, bought a new one, installed it, and the car ran great. I looked like a total stud that day. Story 8. My girlfriend's mom, many years ago, locked herself out of her restaurant. She had to prepare for a party she had booked early in the day. The locksmith could not arrive for another few hours. I said I would have a look, as I used to enjoy trying to pick locks and padlocks as a kid. It was purely for fun. It took me a maximum of 30 seconds to open the padlock on the shutter and then the Yale lock. This was many years ago, so they were not as advanced as they are today. She looked at me with a mixture of gratitude and surprise, wondering who was dating her daughter and how he knew about locks. Strangely, she had completely new locks fitted after that. I will admit, picking these locks was about 95% pure luck. It just happened that fortune was smiling on me that day. Story 9. My friends and I were out on the town. Someone parked and blocked in a girl's car. We were walking past a gravel lot. We were all fairly strong, so we slid the car sideways so she could drive out. We left it sideways so he couldn't just drive out. We felt it was karma. Story 10. When I was in the military prior to finishing my service, I was asked to join a different unit for a week to command the soldiers. It was a bit unusual, but my officer knew their officer, and it was the same branch. When I arrived, the company commander assumed I came from a special unit. I told him that if he hit better than me at the shooting range, I would tell him which unit I was from. I thought it was a joke. On shooting range day, he took 10 coins from his wallet and placed 5 on my target and 5 on his. We each had 5 bullets, and he was dead serious about our bet. I managed to hit 5 out of 5 coins. I was sure it was either luck or he aimed at my coins too. I'm a good shot, but 5 out of 5 coins? I had hoped for 2. Regardless, we spent the rest of the week playing the which unit I came from game. He didn't believe me when I identified my unit, and my officer told him it was classified. Story 11. I had a car I was meaning to get around to selling. I had already bought my next one, and then someone snapped off my wing mirror overnight. I bought a used spare, took the door apart, and fitted it, the first thing I ever did on a car. During the next test drive from a prospective buyer, they tried to lower the window and it stalled halfway. I said, "I know what that is. Don't worry about it." But internally, I was face-palming hard. After they left, I took the door apart again, tucked in the cable this time, and put it all back together. Story 12. Busted open the floor at my church with my pastor's jackhammer to change the pipes. He knows quite a few trades. He is going to teach me how to lay the concrete back over it once we are done. Story 13. Rescued a man on an overpass. Driving by, I saw a man standing on a bridge. I pulled over and talked him down. We sat on the highway in the rain, getting drenched, as I convinced him to go to the hospital with me. I never bragged about it. I was just a man helping another man. Story 14. I scared away a mother cougar with cubs. I was just trying to get home, and in order to do so, I had to scare her. It worked. I got home safely, and she and her cubs survived. All's well that ends well. Story 15. I threw a full orange out of the driver's side car window across my own windshield as I passed a garbage bin. It went straight in. It was 30 years ago. Story 16. My grandmother was having computer problems and asked me for help. I turned it off and back on again. She thought I was a magician. Story 17. During an event where we really needed water, I repaired a water pump with a piece of perfectly cut inner bike tube. Story 18. I tore down my old kitchen and built a new one all by myself, except for hiring an electrician for the permanent installations. It is incredibly satisfying to almost always be able to open a can on the first try, especially when you see that others have tried on the same can before you. Story 19. I saw a woman with a flat tire in a parking lot talking on the phone. I stopped to ask if she was okay. She said she had called roadside assistance, but they were an hour away. I parked, got out, and changed her tire in 10 minutes. She asked me to show her what I was doing so she could do it in the future. I put her old tire in the trunk, wished her a good evening, and drove away. Story 20. Hosted a party and had a keg of Pilsner Urquell delivered. When I went to tap the keg, I found out the liquor store delivered the wrong tap. The Pilsner Urquell keg uses a smaller diameter tap. While guests waited, I pulled my homebrewed beer out of the fridge to get everyone started. Then I took parts from my beer supplies and changed the components so I could tap the keg. Story 21. I confronted a mugger in Los Angeles once. He came at me with a knife, yelling, "What's up?" Without thinking, I ran toward him, which put him off balance. I kicked him hard in the crotch, causing him to drop the knife. When he tried to pick it up again, I kicked him, tripped him, and stomped on his abdomen. By then, his only thought was to get away from me. It was a risky action, but I managed to get away and never told anyone about it. Story 22. I was in a trauma-intensive medical training course, more advanced than a paramedic but less than a physician assistant, in San Antonio, Texas, coming home after a late shift. It was close to 2 a.m., and as I crossed an intersection, I looked to my left and saw 4 or 5 men curb stomping another man into the ground. I whipped my truck around, flipped on my brights, roared the engine, and drove my truck at the group, kicking the man in the middle of the street. The crowd scattered. I pulled out my first aid kit, dealt with the immediate injuries, and prepared to transport him to the hospital because this was 1992, before cell phones. He refused and asked to be driven home about 6 to 8 blocks away. I brought him into his apartment, treated the wounds better, did my best to rule out any head injury, and called his girlfriend to take over bedside care. I followed up for a couple of weeks, stopping by a few times a day. The man got better, his girlfriend was very appreciative, and I moved away. I always wondered what happened to him. The fight was about the girlfriend. The other men were angry that she chose him. Story 23. I was hitting it off with this girl at a bar when she told me she wanted to go home with me. The only problem was she had to drop her 3 friends off first. When we got in the car, they were immediately skeptical of me and were being absolutely brutal, which was fair since their friend had met me just an hour ago. At some point during the ride, as they were throwing barbs at me, the car's tire blew out on a rough road. They all started freaking out because it was 2 a.m. and we were not in a good spot. Even though I was half drunk, I told them I had this and popped the trunk. I changed the tire in record time. When I got back in the car, I swear they all had that cartoon hard-eyes look on their faces and were gushing about how impressive that was. Needless to say, the rest of the night went fantastically, and my confidence was at an all-time high. Story 24. Dropped the transmission out of the first car I owned and changed the clutch plate and throw bearing. I had never done anything more complicated than add oil or change a light bulb before that. Story 25. I once helped my best friend carry and install their new washing machine. His mother had just bought it and needed it installed as their old one broke down. We carried it to the 3rd floor with no elevator, installed it, made sure it worked, and then grabbed a cold beer afterward. A different friend once called me around 3 a.m. while he was on a date with his girlfriend. He had parked his car close to a beach and left his headlights on, so his car battery was dead. I drove 45 minutes to help him get his car working again. He offered me a beer after driving his girlfriend back home. The same friend once had a flat tire and called me around midnight. It was not too far from where I live. I drove 15 minutes, helped him change his tire, and showed him how to do it for next time. Story 26. I was hanging out by a bonfire one night, and the intoxicated woman stumbled towards it. She was definitely going to fall into this huge fire, but I caught her. I didn't spill my drink. I didn't stop telling my story. I just casually saved this woman from 3rd-degree burns and kept on going. Story 27. My father and I renovated his new house after his 2nd divorce, within the span of a spring and a summer. It was not perfect and not completed, but we transformed an 80-year-old lived-in building into a livable space for him and me, at least for a few months until I moved out. It helped that it was 2020 and we basically could not have a social life, so we installed drywall, insulated, caulked, and painted the kitchen, living room, bathroom, and his bedroom, which had a custom bed frame, between March and August. It was a great way to bond and learn some practical skills. I moved out in November of that year, and the rest of the renovations have been slow but steady since they were not really necessary for him to live there. He is also getting older, and it is not as easy to make enough time to do everything he wants. He has a new partner who is moving in soon. We both have full-time jobs. At some point, we will finish his dream house with an attached recording studio, and I believe it will be the proudest moment of both our lives. Story 28. Went fishing with my brother. The beach had some older men fishing. The moment I threw the line in, we caught a big black drum. Not a minute later, we collected our things and left. The older men could not believe what they were watching. Story 29. I did a lot of the do-it-yourself work in my 100-plus-year-old neglected house, including completely salvaging my wooden worktop that was black from water damage by sanding and re-oiling it. I rewired all the power sockets with nice new brass ones and retiled my bathroom. I am pretty proud of myself considering that I had zero experience beforehand. I feel like a lot of people would not believe I was capable of it, especially with my dwarfism causing some mobility issues. Story 30. Swapped an engine on my winter beater alone in my garage one afternoon. Credit where it is due. I did pull it out once not too long before because, EJ25 engines. Most hurdles were cleared. Story 31. When I was in 3rd grade, we had a kid in our class who was a bit behind in certain ways. The typical 3 bully-type guys picked on him on his way home. I confronted all 3 of them by running past and trying to hit each one just once. That drew their attention, and me and another guy ran off. I felt like a superhero and a man. At least, that is what I thought a man is supposed to do. Story 32. I changed a transmission on the side of the road during a blizzard. A friend called me and said his transmission was broken and he was stuck on the side of the expressway. I told him to hang tight and that I would meet him to help get him home. I put the transmission I had in my garage into the back of my car and grabbed my tools. I met him and we got to work. We jacked up the car, piled snow around the sides to block the wind, climbed under, and began working. An hour later, we were back at his garage. 3 days later, we swapped another transmission into his car, and I took mine back home. Story 33. A woman who lived in my apartment complex needed help moving her husband's old manual transmission Jeep. He was at work, the vehicle was parked in someone else's spot, and she did not know how to drive it. Story 34. On my way to work, I stopped to change a flat tire for two women stranded on the side of the road. I was doing a presentation that day, so I was dressed in a suit and tie. I took off my coat and tie and then changed the tire. I refused to be paid for it. I got in my car, then turned around to change into a new shirt and pants. I came in and nailed the presentation. Story 35. I gave my seat to an elderly woman on the bus. A couple of teenagers sitting in front of me and across the aisle watched. I looked at them and said, "That's how it's done." They both immediately looked away. Story 36. Roommate had an asthma attack. We lived on the 4th floor of a walk-up building. Instead of waiting for the paramedics, I put him over my shoulder and carried him down to meet them. Story 37. My wife's best friend was being stalked by an old boyfriend. I bought and installed cameras at her house, installed a dashboard camera, and changed her locks. I went to her workplace every day at closing time to run the man off. I confronted him myself 2 or 3 times. Eventually, I got him arrested twice. He finally left her alone. Note: I am a chubby little 5'4" man. Not very intimidating in real life. Story 38. I found a use for a piece of molding that I had stored in the basement 12 years ago because it might come in handy someday. Story 39. Uninstalling an old stove and reinstalling a new one. It took about an hour to move it from the basement to the 3rd floor of the building, remove some parts, and keep the good parts for repairs later. Story 40. I don't know how I feel about it, but I helped my father with a problem just like he used to do for me. Part of me feels great about being helpful, but another part sees my father getting older and eventually struggling to do things he enjoys by himself. Story 41. I have a half-ton conference table, made from a 12-foot section of bowling alley and wrapped in steel, with industrial steel legs weighing 200 pounds each. The team of movers and I placed it disassembled, leaning on its side against the wall of my garage. A couple of months later, I assembled it and moved it upright and into place by myself using a makeshift system of pulleys, brackets, and sheer grip. Story 42. Maybe not the manliest thing in the world, but I was at a family Christmas party as a 19-year-old in the early 2000s, and my uncle's older neighbors were having trouble with their computer. I confidently offered to help, went back with them to their house, and right in front of them diagnosed a complex problem with a random error code and their email server failing. I diagnosed and fixed it in about 15 minutes. It involved a corrupted file and downloading and replacing it with a new one from the proper software, which back then did not update automatically at all. They would never have fixed it on their own, even though it was pretty easy. We went back to the party, and they told my entire extended family that I was a computer genius. They offered me a job that same night. The man was the director of transportation for my state. I did not take it, but I still felt confident. Story 43. I locked myself out of my 3rd-floor apartment on Easter, wearing a robe and slippers and nothing else. There was a ham in the oven, and I did not have my phone. I waited for my mom to arrive and we tried to call a locksmith, then the landlord. No luck. So, I had her drive me to Home Depot, and in my fuzzy pink robe and slippers, I rented an extension ladder. When they found out what I planned to do, they almost did not give it to me, but I made it clear I would not leave without it. Then, my mom and sister held the ladder against the side of the house, and it was swaying in the wind. I shimmed up it, opened my unlocked bedroom window, and vaulted myself in just as the timer for the ham went off. Story 44. With the help of a YouTube video, I fixed my washing machine, which had been leaking. I am not very good mechanically. Story 45. I don't know why, but on 3 occasions during a night out, someone has approached me and asked to arm wrestle. I have not lost yet, but I have no idea how I give off an arm wrestling vibe. Story 46. Making my own smokehouse has resulted in making my own beef jerky, bacon, and ham so far. I look forward to making more delicious meats. Story 47. Did repairs, oil and brake changes, and a variety of work on all my cars up until my truck currently. There is too little time and too many changes in computer system alerts for me to keep track of. Plus, I got it and hit 3 deer in 4 years. The truck is a definite target. Story 48. After living in our 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house, I made some small updates hoping to sell it. I took on the project of tearing the bathroom down to the studs and doing a quick remodel, stretching any knowledge I had. With the walls bare, my wife walked in and asked, "What would it take to add a bathroom right above this one on the 2nd floor?" I thought about it for a few minutes, took a tape measure, and a month later we had a second much-needed bathroom just in time to sell the house. Story 49. My car went off into a ditch after hitting black ice. I dislocated my right shoulder and instead of waiting for help, I jammed it back in so I could escape through the sunroof. I am proud of myself for reacting in a calm, logical manner. I don't talk about this story because even after walking to a farmhouse and using their phone to get a tow truck, I never got checked by a doctor until days later. Story 50. Years ago, in 2007, I bought a used couch off Craigslist. My best friend from college helped me pick it up. He and I had helped each other move in and out of multiple places over our college years from 2000 to 2006. We arrived at the apartment to pick up the couch. It was in a 3rd-floor apartment with a zigzagging staircase. The seller cautioned us about moving it down the stairs and gave us advice. We picked it up and carefully zigzagged our way down the stairs, lifting the couch and rotating it as needed to get over the stair handrails and corners. We barely communicated verbally because we were so in sync. When we got to the bottom of the stairs, the seller smiled and laughed, saying, "You guys have done this before." We both laughed and replied, "Yeah, not our first rodeo." It was simple and natural, but we obviously impressed the other guy. Story 51. I rebuilt my front porch board by board. I had helped my dad build a deck before, but I was just grunt labor. I tore my old front porch down and rebuilt it by myself. Right after I finished, a man walking his dog stopped and told me how good a job I did. He said he had been tracking my progress. He asked if I did it for a living, and I said no, this was my first time attempting it solo. Felt good. Felt really good. Story 52. I have been perfecting my fire pit for 2 years. It is about 3.5 feet in diameter, with tall bricks around the rim to prevent sparks from jumping. I have dug a channel under the bricks in one spot for increased airflow. The opening is just big enough to fit a leaf blower nozzle, so I can supercharge my fires whenever I want. It is the best. 8-foot flames in a matter of minutes. I am currently revising the design and adding a couple of new bricks where the intake is. I will post pictures if requested. Story 53. I fixed my washing machine by watching a video on YouTube. It was flashing an error code, and the video said there was a booklet attached inside the machine that had the error code legend. The code was bad shift actuator. I bought a new one for $35 and installed it. The machine worked and I was very happy. Story 54. My neighbor was locked out of her house, so I used my parkour skills to jump into her house. The roof door was closed, so I had to make my way through a tight square window. I was a kid at that time, so I could fit in with some effort. I opened the main door for her. She thanked me and appreciated my help the next day. Story 55. Quite a few winters ago, I got a call from a friend saying she was stuck in a ditch near my house. Having already helped her sister out of a ditch in their driveway, I grabbed all the chains I owned, drove over, and saw a minivan in the ditch. It was resting on the passenger side. She doesn't drive a minivan. She and her friend walked over and said they had pulled over to check on those inside and asked if it would be possible to get them out. I took a look during a snowstorm and said, "Forget it, we'll give it a shot." I put chains on the tires, told the driver to steer out and lightly give it some gas. At this point, I was sideways across the road, amber strobe lights on, with 20 feet of chain hooked to the minivan. I managed to pull a miracle and get it out of the ditch without any damage, much to the relief of everyone who had gathered. I felt confident watching the flatbed show up, look at me unhook the chains from my pickup, then turn off the strobes and drive away. Story 56. When my girlfriend at the time was moving house, I managed to fit her entire life into a van. She and her flatmates kept telling me to just do it in 2 or 3 trips. I thought, no, and using my Tetris skills, I managed to fit everything in. They did not believe I could do it and were amazed when I succeeded. A manly moment I will not soon forget. Story 57. I broke an Easter egg open perfectly using a roundhouse kick yesterday. Random, but I felt very cool. Story 58. Fixed my own toilet, changed my own oil, installed my own faucet in the shower. They are little things, but I am proud to have the knowledge. Story 59. I had an old, unreliable car back in college. One morning, I went to take off and my brake pedal went to the floor. The rubber brake hose blew out. Everything was so rusted that I couldn't even tell what size wrench I needed for the fittings. I limped it to Walmart, bought brake fluid and a 98-cent vice grip. I clamped the hose shut with the vice grip, filled the brake fluid, did a couple of test stops in the parking lot to make sure I could stop and wasn't leaking fluid, then went about my day. 3 years later, I sold the car with the vice grip still in place. Story 60. I remember once fixing an electrical issue in the house with just a screwdriver and some wire. I felt like a member of the Avengers. Story 61. Changed the door on a tumble dryer. Converted an empty room into a kitchen pantry. My wife was impressed, even though it was only shelving and accessories. Story 62. This girl in our house dropped her gold earring down the sink. She was crying and panicking. My friend woke me up and asked what to do. I went to the bathroom, opened the sink trap under the cabinet, and gave her back the earring. She was very happy and cooked for me that day. I went back to sleep. Story 63. I scared away a black bear that was running at me and my wife in Sequoia National Park. We were hiking along some very steep switchbacks, watching a doe and a young fawn. We followed them for a while. At one point, the fawn walked up the mountain off the trail, and the doe stayed on the trail near us, watching it. Suddenly, a black bear came charging down the mountain after the fawn. The fawn managed to get away, thankfully, and the doe ran off as well. I couldn't believe how fast that bear charged down the hill. After the deer got away, the bear started walking back up the mountain to the part of the trail where we were and then began running toward us. We had nowhere to go because the mountain was too steep. When the bear got close to us, I jumped out and yelled, which scared it off. I was hiding behind a tree while my wife stood on the trail. It was terrifying. I only jumped out because I was afraid the bear was about to attack my wife. Story 64. I pushed a grocery cart about 60 feet from the cart return, and it perfectly turned into the cart return. Story 65. My neighbor asked me to fix his lawnmower in front of my wife. The real win is that she mentioned it to her father, my father-in-law, and he said, "Maybe he can fix mine too." I work in information technology full-time but started fixing small engines during the pandemic as a hobby. Story 66. Our clothes dryer broke down, so I had a repairman come to check it out. He said it was a specific part and it would cost $350 to fix. I found the part online for $28 and fixed it myself. It still works. Story 67. A friend drove his front-wheel drive car up and off a strangely positioned ramp, getting it stuck, balanced on one of its axles, with only 3 wheels on the ground and 1 front wheel hanging in the air. They struggled for half an hour trying to wedge planks against the hanging wheels so it could gain traction and drive off, but to no avail. Just as they were deciding to call a tow truck, I got everyone to sit in positions that tipped the car more onto the front wheel firmly on the ground to increase traction, and off it went. I thought of it because of Initial D. Story 68. I bought a plot of land with 49 trees that need to be removed where my house is going. My friend, who is a tree surgeon, did not have time to do it. I bought 2 chainsaws and borrowed his forestry pulley. I cut down 3 15-meter pines and many 10-meter trees. It was very satisfying. Story 69. An Asian specialty market I frequented had moving furniture, and the middle-aged owner was struggling to load display cases into a van as I walked by. I helped him out and secured the items in a couple of minutes. I was in a hurry and walked on, but a week later, when I was shopping there, a girl around my age screamed across the shop, "Hey, you're the guy who helped my dad and ran away." We chatted and went out for drinks later. Nothing came of it, but I was proud of that. Story 70. This is both sides of the coin. I was picking up a pizza with my girlfriend. We got out. When we returned with the pizza, I had mistakenly locked the keys in the running car. I went back inside to get a coat hanger. I was able to unlock the car in a minute or two. Story 71. I diagnosed 2 bad ignition coils on my son's truck without stepping outside. I sent him to the parts store, and he replaced them within 2 hours of the initial symptoms. He was impressed. He had forgotten that 2 other coils had gone bad a couple of years ago and displayed the same symptoms. Story 72. I drove my mother-in-law of 20 years and her friend to the airport this past summer. I took all the back routes, handled all the turns confidently with one hand on the wheel and the other on the gear stick, earned every green light with solid acceleration and sensible braking, and got them there 15 minutes ahead of time. I was barefoot because it was hot. There were lots of appreciative sounds coming from the back seats where they were sitting. Now understand, this is the woman who, when we take her out to a restaurant for her birthday, will say, "Save your money. I could have made this," and was once caught rehanging the washing I put outside because there's not enough air between the clothes. Almost a year later, mass gatherings are still marked by her telling her relatives and friends how I am such a good driver and how her grandkids will always be safe. That's right, lady. Admire me. Story 73. I would admit pretty much anything. I think my best recent moment was at a bar in New York where some drunk man kept pushing into my wife and her friends. One of the women got tired of it and said something to him, which set him off. He got in our faces, kept insulting them, and called me a coward. I thought it was amusing and wasn't intimidated by him at all for some reason. He just came across as weak. I finally asked him, "Hey, where do you live?" "Around here." He was thrown off and asked why but wouldn't tell me. I said, "Because I'm going to follow you home, but if I can't find you, I want to visit you." That seemed to make him pause for a second. Then I said, "Take yourself to the other side of the bar." He then said the best line I have ever heard from someone, "Fine, but I'm not leaving because you told me to." Foolish man. Story 74. I had a wild month. I changed my faucet cartridges and replaced an old water faucet connected to the washing machine using professional tools. I also installed a new water filter. My water pump stopped working because the tanks it draws from were empty. I filled the tanks and flooded the lines so the pump could operate again. My wife is happy, and my energy levels are very high. Story 75. When I was in good shape, I was the go-to mover in my friend group. My proudest accomplishment was moving a very heavy solid wood wardrobe down the stairs with 3 other people. 3 on the top side and me by myself on the bottom, doing most of the weight bearing. Now I limit myself to pet food bags and groceries. Story 76. I was helping my friend fix his car because it needed a new alternator at his girlfriend's house. Her sister arrived in her car, complaining that someone had hit it and damaged the bumper. I got down to look at it, and in less than 30 seconds, I popped the bumper back into place with my hands. It might not sound like much, but I felt very proud. Story 77. Lifted the refrigerator out of my house and onto the end of the driveway. That thing weighed a ridiculous amount, and when she got home, my partner was flabbergasted that I moved it alone. I felt like He-Man. Story 78. My girlfriend's car died at night on a remote highway. I got out, looked under the hood with a flashlight, found a loose alternator wire, and had us back on our way. I also rescued a kitten from a tree once. Story 79. I defecated on the side of a random person's yard while hiding from the police for getting caught smashing pumpkins in high school. I then wiped with his lawn disposal paper bag. My two friends who were with me just watched and laughed the whole time. Story 80. Fixed a tractor that would not crank over. It then started leaking water everywhere, and the hydraulics were dead on arrival. I never ran it again, and my parents gave it to a man because nobody else wanted it. Story 81. In college, I lived in a house with 7 people. The house next door was abandoned, but it had a grill in the back. One time during a party, one of my housemates and I climbed over the fence, flipped the grill over the top, and we had a free grill. We were all vegan, so we made vegetable shish kebabs. Story 82. We were making ice cream and I got challenged. We had an ice cream salt and water mixture to see how long you could stick your hand in all the way to the bottom and stay there. Who was going to pull out first? I won. It was cold. Story 83. Took me a while to remember a manly thing I've done that I can be proud of, but here goes. We were doing some renovations at the house, and my mom decided she wanted to extend the outhouse to add a spa, a bar, and 2 extra toilets. I said to her, "Okay, I'm pretty sure I can get that done once I find out where the pipe to the sewage disposal is." She laughed and questioned my proficiency in anything that isn't digital. The next day, I created a computer-aided design drawing and prepared a budget of everything needed to complete the project. She still doubted me and said, "Your dad won't allow it." Finally, I lost interest and moved on. Then she hired a contractor to do the job. I told her outright before they started working, "Mom, these guys have no idea what they're doing. The estimate they gave is way too low when you factor in labor. Plus, it's almost winter, and you cannot leave this project half done and wait until the temperature rises a little." Still, she ignored me. To cut the story short, they started with the foundation, created the structure, then began roofing. The roof is a flat kind rather than a triangular one. I asked the builders, "Will you be using steel beams to hold up the weight of the roof, as well as columns for extra support?" He replied, "No." I snickered and left. Now the roof is falling in, and they are refusing to offer compensation. The manly part. The ceiling was falling due to water damage, and my mum was there. I perceived the danger and immediately moved her aside just as the ceiling caved in. I got some ceiling debris on me, and she was a little flustered. Needless to say, I felt good throughout the day. Story 84. I usually sit at home and do my work in my bedroom, but last month, I had to get a manuscript, handwritten, from someone who lived beyond the capital city. So I woke up early, took a 5-hour bus, then took the metro network, changing 4 times. I got to the other side of the city, walked the last 2-mile journey, got the script, and then came back the same route except I took a train. I planned all this the day before. This was my first time in the city alone and my first time there in 10 years. It was the planning and near-perfect execution, although the train was late, on my first solo trip to the capital. Considering I am usually holed up in my house, it was surprising to my family that I pulled it off effortlessly for the most part. Sometimes I wonder if that is my calling, to just go places. But, of course, earning money on the go can be an issue, especially in a gradually shifting political world. Story 85. Doing martial arts for some years, my friends made fun of me at a party because they said it would not work. I picked the strongest guy in our friend group, with whom I have been friends my whole life, and teased him a little until he asked me what I would do if he tried to punch me and told me to do it. I took him down with a sloppy single leg, passed his even sloppier bulldog choke, and went into mount. I did nothing else but put all my weight sitting on his chest and avoided his eye pokes until he nearly blacked out because he had no air left. I stood up, helped him up, and we were drinking again. That felt awesome. Never again did anyone try to make fun of my training. Story 86. Changed my tire on the highway when I got a flat. I will never do that again on a highway. I was more scared of being hit by passing cars. Story 87. Helped someone through Reddit escape an abusive domestic situation. Never knew or met them in real life. Felt like James Bond. Story 88. I was at a family reunion discussing with my uncle. He said that you cannot remove plastic braids if they are tied around your wrists on both hands. I said it was possible because I saw a video but never tried. Then he took some plastic braids, tied my hands, and squeezed them hard so I could not move them. He looked at me and said, "Let's see." I then pulled up my knee and, with a quick movement of my hands striking my knee, I broke the plastic braid on the first try. The faces of my uncle and all my family were very funny. I felt so strong, not sure why. Story 89. 15 years after I discovered that my sister was molested by a friend of mine, I searched the internet for him but found nothing. By the grace of God, I met someone who went to the same school as us and was referred to their alumni network. I finally found the man who worked as a recruiter in the same city where I lived. I pretended to be a potential client, set up a meeting, and showed up with revenge in mind. He begged for forgiveness, and I put him on the phone with my sister and made him apologize. He was in tears. My sister and I finally found closure. Story 90. A woman with 3 children was struggling to get across an underpass with a stroller, which was also very heavy due to the items inside. I lifted it up for her, making it easier for her to manage the children on the stairs. She was very grateful. Story 91. My girlfriend was struggling to roll a big rock behind our house. I walked over, picked it up, put it where it needed to be, patted her on the back, and went back to what I was doing. Girls like it when you lift big rock. Story 92. I used my buddy's driver's license as a lockpick to help him get into his room when he locked himself out. It was the first time I attempted it, and it worked like a charm, which blew his mind as he thought he was completely stuck and was considering calling a locksmith. The maneuver took only a few seconds. Story 93. I made a full-court basketball shot when nobody was around. Even if there was a witness, I did not really have a chance to brag about it. Story 94. This happened 5 years ago. I was on a date with a girl at a fancy place. I was wearing derby shoes and accidentally stomped on her toe. She was hurt and started bleeding. I took her to a nearby restaurant, ordered some drinks, asked around for first aid, and carefully cleaned and bandaged her wound. I felt ashamed of my clumsiness. My mind was telling me that I had messed up. Later that evening, she confessed that she loved me. Maybe the care and concern I showed was the final push she needed. Story 95. I took on a whole bathroom tear-out and remodel a month and a half before our baby was due, on the promise that I would have it done before the baby came so the house wouldn't be a messy project site when we brought him home. Thank God that kid wasn't premature. So anyway, I was working until 1 a.m. every weeknight after work and all weekend for 3 weeks. Of course, I ran into snags in our old house. It was the 4th of July on a Wednesday, a freehold day in the middle of the week that I was determined to make the best of. First thing, 5:30 a.m., I ran the last board of flooring through the table saw and it jumped up on me. I tried to catch it in the air and instead ended up putting my right index finger into the spinning blade. A nasty diagonal cut into the tip probably nicked the bone a bit. Most of the fingernail was hanging off by a shred of meat. A circular wood blade is not a clean slice, more like a tattered gouge. Poured blood and hurt intensely. Now this was a holiday, so only the emergency room would be open, and I thought about the wait time of an extra busy emergency room with all the people burning themselves on grills and playing with fireworks early. I thought I would lose half the day in that emergency room, so I wrapped and splinted it and kept on working. Having the tip of your index finger on your dominant hand mangled and throbbing with hot pulses of pain while you hoist and screw drywall sheets and hammer and trim, that's tough. I had to make runs to the hardware store and kept forgetting that my finger was splinted straight. So when I shifted into first and third gear in the truck, I jabbed my finger into the dashboard and howled with agony. I punched the roof of the cab so hard it left outward dents. The remaining week of the project was awful. I couldn't get it stitched because when I went in the next day, when I could see my regular doctor and not wait all day, the wound was too swollen to suture. So I just had to leave it to heal open, bandaged and padded, of course. Every swing of the hammer felt like I was bringing the hammer down on my own fingertip. But I got that bathroom done and everything cleaned up and perfect before the baby came. Because a man keeps his promises, especially to his very pregnant wife expecting her first child. The night of the injury, my wife wanted to be intimate, but I was like, "Baby, I think I'm too tired and in pain even for that." But she was like, no, I need to be intimate with you. I went for it for her. It was the most appreciative, no, worshipful experience I've ever had. Story 96. Wrapped a chain around the front end of my very old car, with the other end around a light pole. I reversed and pulled out the front end dent from a car accident. Excellent. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.